around a whole series of other communication pieces and supports that we talk about.
I think, Peter, from my experience, I mean, people think communication is putting together a few slides, making a presentation to staff, maybe having a handout, maybe having a website, and that's communication. I mean, that's just informing people. What we're trying to get around is how can we engage them so as we gain acceptance and ultimately, I suppose, clarify issues and you get commitment from people. Now, there's a lot of steps in that, and there's a lot of, obviously, you've got to build trust. So it's not a question you suddenly turn around and start communicating and expect people to buy in. That process has to start a long time before. So regular communication. I mean, the secret to communication is communication, really. From our experience of it.
I think, I suppose, for me, a good definition of communications is not the message that's delivered, it's the message that's heard. So, a management team go away, they might have 2 or 3 sessions, they've had an in-depth look at the business, they come up with what they think is a very good plan, and then they assume that everybody else is on the same wavelength as them, and they come out with maybe a very business speak in terms of market share and going forward, this is what, the troubles we're going to be facing. When in reality, I'm down on the ground, I'm meeting customers as well, I know there's trouble. And John is presenting to me, I'm concerned, what does this mean for me?
Yeah.
What does this mean for the future? When I deal with customers, what does it mean for them? Yeah. And I suppose a lot of the times, I know, Peter, people come to you on this all the time, but a lot of time it's about flipping it and saying, not presenting from my standpoint, but presenting from the standpoint of the audience I'm talking to.
But
it's the key part of it, isn't it, really?
Well, just building on what Mick said, I worked with one client and the senior people, the top management kind of got up and did the town hall session. Yeah. But what they did after that and what we suggested was then in the departments, in the functional areas, the local management, that middle layer who know their team and they know individuals, they then sat around and had follow-on sessions. Because sometimes in the big arena people aren't comfortable to speak up, they don't want to ask a question. And so the local management sat around, much as we're sitting here today, and said, well, okay, you've heard, the scenario. What, how do you feel about it? What's your reaction? What do you think the challenges and the obstacles are going to be? And those individuals were able to really, I suppose, get a good sense of where people were at in relation to it. And also they got very valuable feedback around, what people saw as being the practical implications. And it actually turned out to be a very positive experience.
And there's 2 issues in and around that makes that successful. Because that's what happened, the rollout part of it, right? The rollout part, the important thing about the rollout part, and I think we all would experience this, is that you have to be absolutely sure that the person who's doing the next step and the next step of the rollout are on the same page as everybody else, because there's no question about it. I mean, I was talking to a guy during the week about this, and he was telling me that they did an exercise where they started off a message up here, and 15 or 20 people later it was a totally different message. And so that's why, for instance, rehearsal is hugely important. People often think, I know what I want to say. No, you don't, because I've seen it. We had a thing recently here with a company in the financial sector, and we were working it through, and everybody was around the same table. And we actually got them to articulate it, put them on camera to articulate it, and you could see the little chinks, the little differences, and those little differences get magnified as you go down through an organisation.
Staff will pick those up as well.
Pardon?
Staff will pick those up very quick. Those guys aren't on message.
So therefore they're not on message, and also that you need to rehearse the questions that you're going to be asked to be a listening organisation as well, because I think in this thing here, the two-way thing. But I think from again, one of the things that you need to figure out if you're doing a change programme, around the table like we're here now, the first thing is to figure out that we here, the central group of people, needs to become the most valuable and reliable source of information during the whole process. Because the minute something starts like this, of course, the grapevine takes over, and you have to be the most reliable. How are you going to be the most reliable? You're going to be the most reliable because you're going to be the most truthful. You're going to be the most accurate. You're going to be the most concise, and you're going to be the most timely people with communication. So you take charge of the communication, right? And you're out there straight up front with it, accurate, timely, and truthful and concise with the information that you're going to get. And when people talk about communication, you mentioned it there, John, earlier on about when communication happens. Communication happens long before you actually even say something.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's conditioning. The sort of thing. People get the feeling around the place that there's something going wrong. We had one instance a number of years ago, and I don't know how it actually happened. These guys came into us very, very late, and it took about 2 sessions for us to figure out what actually was happening ourselves, and we were the ones that helped them. But basically, they were closing down an organisation. They weren't telling anybody, and there was nothing there to pay anybody, right? It was really a doomsday situation. But they told nobody. We worked on the message, and the first time that people heard this was on the day, and literally people fainted.
Right.
One of our people who was out there throwing water, actually bringing them into the loop, because it came totally, absolutely out of the blue. Now, I think it's important to have a conditioning type situation where people will know for things that are said, comments that are made, things that are not said.
Well, I think, Peter, is the organisation brave enough to start discussions rather than have an informing approach? Are they going to discuss with staff, discuss the issues, put the facts in front of them months in advance, ideally, if they can, and get staff to come to the same conclusion is the ideal. They're debating the issues, so it's not just about informing, it's really discussion. And just one thing that struck me when you talked about the management team getting their act together, which I think is critical. One of the things they should do is try to work out what are the difficult or wicked questions that are in this business and how are we going to answer them. Like, in terms of redundancies, are there going to be redundancies? Are they going to be voluntary? What options do I have? Will there be outplacement facilities available to us or what?
And all that needs to be discussed around. Sorry, go ahead.
I know, I'm just looking, John, on one of the comments coming in. Is you're on topic. How do we manage and implement pay reductions without ruffling too many feathers?
Right.
Apart from the practicality of the pay, it's how that piece is communicated.
Absolutely.
But I would find that if you actually make a compelling case meaning that there's this inescapable logic we talked about, that you're saying, here is the issue and people cannot escape. In other words, you look at the present situation, in the communication that you look at the present situation and you project it forward in a way that it makes absolute sense that you cannot go on as you are. For one of two reasons. People will change for one of two reasons. They change because if they go on, they're going to have a problem, or if they go on, they're going to miss an opportunity. I call this kind of sometimes landmines and lollipops. In other words, if you keep going on as you are, you're going to hit a landmine, or you're going to sail past the lollipops, if that's what you like. But if that's clear before you talk about anything else, the first part of your communication in terms of the announcement of it. Second thing then is what exactly we're going to do, right? And then what the consequences are going to be at the end of that, so people will see the vision that you have. So if you're putting together that particular, that's the central communication that you're putting together in terms of the validity for this and the reason behind it. Think of it that way, inescapable logic, that the first part of it is the issue that is inescapable as far as people are concerned. Then they're very clear on what actually is going to happen, and then they're clear on what the outcome is likely or hoped to be at the end. And the proof of that is if you think about, I always call it the kitchen table. When somebody goes home after they've heard this and they're with their spouse or their partner back, and what happened today at work? God, we're going to be a very announcement today about we're actually restructuring. What does that mean? Now, if they can repeat that, or what do you want them to repeat? They can't. They're not going to do a major big strategic
what's the
presentation over the dinner table, So that's your key thing, what can be repeated. So I would see it as this, that there's the conditioning phase that you will get for people, there's the actual announcement phase when we're actually making sure that people know exactly what's going on. During the process then afterwards, as it's going through, there's all the communication that goes through that.